Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we will talk about Kyoto Protocol 1997. The Kyoto Protocol, the first international treaty to set legally binding targets to cut greenhouse gas emissions, was adopted 25 years ago on December 1997 in Kyoto, Japan. The agreement, which entered into force in 2005 and was ratified by 192 parties, has since been superseded by the Paris Agreement but remains a historic landmark in the international fight against climate change. Kyoto Protocol 1997. The Kyoto Protocol was an agreement among development nations to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and greenhouse gases to minimize the impacts of climate change. The protocol applied to 6 greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride. The Kyoto Protocol is based on the principle and provisions of the convention and follows its annex-based structure. It only binds developed countries and places a heavier burden on them under the principle of common but different responsibility and respective capabilities, because it recognizes that they are largely responsible for the current high level of GHG emissions in the atmosphere. In its Annex B, the Kyoto Protocol sets binding emissions reduction targets for 37 industrialized countries and economies in transition and the European Union. Overall, these targets add up to an average 5% emissions reduction compared to 1990 level for the 5 years 2008-2012, the first commitment period. The protocol also offered them an additional means to meet their targets by way of three markets-based mechanism. International emissions trading. Countries that emit less than they are allowed to can sell the amount to industrialized countries that produced more than they should. In this way, it becomes economically beneficial to reduce emissions. Clean development mechanism. Joint implements with both CDM and JI countries can invest in an emissions reducing project and gain credit points. The Doha Amendment. In Doha, Qatar, on 8 December 2012, the Doha Amendment to the Kyoto Protocol was adopted for a second commitment period, starting in 2013 and lasting until 2020. The amendment includes new commitments for Annex I parties to the Kyoto Protocol who agree to take commitments in a second commitment period from 1st January 2013 to 31 December 2020. I revised list of GSG to be reported on by parties in the second commitment period and admitted to several articles of the Kyoto Protocol, specifically referenced issued about the first commitment period and which needed to be updated for the second commitment period. Significance of the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol committed industrialized countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by agreed individual targets. The Kyoto Protocol also established a rigorous monitoring, reviews and verification system as well as a compliance system to ensure transparency and hold parties to account. Under the protocol, countries' actual emissions have to be monitored and precise records have to be kept of the trades carries out. Developing nations were asked to comply voluntarily, and more than 100 developing countries, non-access countries including China and India, were exempt from the Kyoto Agreement altogether. Some fact about Kyoto Protocol. 192 countries are parties to the Kyoto Protocol. 84 countries are signatories to the Kyoto Protocol. Canada, Andorra, the United States of America, and South Sudan are not parties to the protocol. It is legally binding and only member of the UNFCCC can became parties to the Kyoto Protocol. It was adopted at the third sessions of UNFCCC. To meet the targets of the Kyoto Protocol, member countries cannot include international shipping and international aviations. Countries can use land use change and forestry to meet their Kyoto targets. China signed the protocol in 1998. The protocol did not include ozone depleting substances, which were later covered by the Montreal Protocol. Difference between the Paris Agreement and Kyoto Protocol. The Paris Agreement is a more recent international agreement adopted in 2015, while the Kyoto Protocol was adopted in 1997. The Paris Agreement has a broader scope than the Kyoto Protocol as it aims to address all greenhouse gases, whereas the Kyoto Protocol focuses specifically on reduced emissions to 6 greenhouse gases. The Paris Agreement sets a long-term goal of net zero emissions, while the Kyoto Protocol sets binding targets for reducing emissions by specific amounts. The Paris Agreement includes commitments from both developed and developing countries to reduce their emissions, while the Kyoto Protocol only sets binding targets of developed countries. The Paris Agreement allows for the use of market mechanisms such as the trading of emissions credits to help countries meet their emissions reduction targets similar to the Kyoto Protocol. India and Kyoto Protocol. India is a party to the Kyoto Protocol, having ratified it in 2002. As a developing country, India was not required to commit to specific emissions reduction targets under the protocol. However, India has voluntarily pledged to reduce its greenhouse gas intensity, or the amount of emissions per unit of GDP, by 25% by 2020 compared in 25 levels. India has actively participated in the negotiations under the protocol, including the development of the Clean Development Mechanism (CDM). India has been one of the largest beneficiaries of the CDM, with a significant number of projects registered under the mechanism. Thank you so much.